everyone, and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast, otherwise known as The LIP. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Sasha from battleface. Good morning or good afternoon, sir. Where are you in the world? I can't remember.
Good morning. Yes, right outside of Washington, D.C. in Virginia.
Lovely, because I confused myself because for the people listening, we were just talking about Brighton and Hove, which is where I'm based. So for a moment I lost, but sadly you're not based there anymore.
Yes, I'm a bit behind you. So,
so how are things in Washington at the moment? What state of lockdown? We need to talk about COVID lockdown scenario first, as always.
It's all a blur, I guess. It's all the same for the last few months. So
yeah.
We're still at our house and not really interacting much with our friends. So
yeah, it's I don't know why it's reassuring to know it's as difficult in other parts of the world. I think it's because we keep beating up on our government that they're doing a worse job of it than any other. But through this podcast, I've been talking to people kind of across the globe, and I think everyone seems to be struggling with it. So anyway, we won't rest on that too much. Sasha, would you be kind enough to introduce kind of battleface, the business, and give us your sort of elevator pitch on it? That'd be great. So we can start that off.
Sure, absolutely. Well, battleface is a travel insurance company that's been designed or was started to essentially start making a difference within the travel insurance world. Because as a team, we come from an extensive travel insurance background. Mm-hmm. And what we saw over the last few years, where the travel industry has been going through rapid changes, unfortunately, travel insurance has not. And COVID-19 actually had proven that point where many products out there or services were not ready for today's times.
Mm-hmm. So you touched on it there, but you've got quite a long history in the travel industry, insurance industry.
Yeah. It's I guess that's all I did for the last 20 plus years now. I used to say for the last 5 years. Now it's 20 plus years. I never thought I would be working within travel insurance or insurance, period. I started out working for a company back then that was a small family-owned business, Travel Guard, that was started out in Wisconsin, and Travel Guard grew to be the largest travel insurance company in North America. Mm-hmm. And I think at the time, Travel Guard was actually the kind of the unicorn of travel insurance because the founder, John Noel, saw an opportunity of starting a travel insurance company within the North American market, and was probably one of the first companies that did that. It gave me an opportunity to learn about the industry from, firsthand. Just because I'm originally from Russia, and I speak Russian, English, and Stevens Point, Wisconsin, where Travel Guard was founded, is a small town in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. And I think John or the executive team was grabbing anyone off the street that could speak any other language but English, because they were building an international company. So I was exposed to the world of global travel insurance right away. And that's what got me to Brighton as well. Living and working out of Brighton because the company bought a travel assistance company that was based out of Hove. And that's where I learned the most important parts of travel insurance. How do you help people when they need it the most? And that's kind of what my specialty is within travel insurance. It's actually stayed emergency medical and travel assistance. And then eventually, after Travel Guard was bought out by AIG, I ended up working for AIG for many years as well, doing the same thing, building out their global operations.
So because that's I just wanted to sort of pick up on that medical resistance and when things go wrong. So that presumably that's where the name comes from. Battleface is because most travel kind of insurance focused companies they're quite fluffy. The name is kind of
travel.
More of if you're like battleface and.
I think that kind of goes back to the actual origins of the problem. when I was working for AIG, eventually I went on to build out a subcontracting company for AIG that was handling emergency medical cases in conflict zones and emerging markets. And for example, AIG is the largest insurer in the world, and at the time, and still do, they were insuring large corporations who were doing work throughout Africa or Middle East. And even the platform that we've built at Travel Guard to do emergency medical assistance was not applicable for these particular contracts because you needed to have people on the ground in these countries in the event of medical emergency, essentially coordinating medical evacuations from Afghanistan to India or from Iraq to Jordan. And in order to do that, you have to hire people on the ground to be able to coordinate these kind of transfers. And so that opened up a whole new world of medical assistance for me. And it was extremely interesting to see how you could do this kind of work in these particular territories. But on top of it, this is where we've seen kind of the gaps within the travel insurance market, because we started to see many travelers going into emerging markets, into different type of places, and mostly were millennials, because no longer, this is where the change in the travel industry has happened, where our grandparents were used to going to, Paris, France for vacation, or Mallorca, Spain, or something that's very standard, where people our age and younger were interested in more of an experience-based travel, or they were driven by, the contract, independent work that they were doing. So, for example, freelancers or NGO workers or contractors, and many, of course, naturally come to you because you're in the industry and saying, I couldn't find travel insurance, or if I do find a company that's willing to insure me, I go through lengthy application forms, and then eventually the price is too high. And so it just became a problem as over and over. So yeah, the battleface name, of course, came out of the kind of the innovation part of the company and the team that I was working with. Actually came from Chris, who was the original founder of the company that was doing work for 10 Years International, for AIG in these countries. And I think it was kind of more of a sentiment to people going into unique destinations, but then not able to find the right policy or the product, and how can we start to change the industry and make it more inclusive. And at the time we were concentrating on freelancers and journalists.
Right.
And I remember this journalist that kept saying, I keep going to a battlefield and I put my face out there and nobody wants to insure me. so it's just, I guess that worked quite nicely. So
it's kind of a sort of, I find the travel insurance industry, particularly the sort of the section of it that you've gone after, particularly the kind of high risk, more bespoke coverage, it really puts insurance under the microscope in the best way, in that, you have a real tangible impact. A lot of times, for example, if you think about the claims process, it's very long, it's laborious, and really we're looking to get someone back to a financial position they're in before. When someone's coming to you with a sort of claim situation, it's a very different situation, because quite often it's like, can you get me out of this country? Can you get medical assistance? There's a real kind of hands-on, effective, helpful tool. And I don't think insurance is looked at in that light. So kind of in a way, I find travel quite interesting from that point of view, because it's like a real world benefit that you really, really need.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously throughout the years, I've seen so many different stories where people's lives were impacted just in all kinds of different directions. I remember my very first case was one of the first cases, I guess. It was just a older couple that was traveling. I think it was somewhere in the, like New Zealand or Australia. And they were involved in a car accident, and the father passed away. And I remember the mother that I was dealing with, she didn't know how to tell the story to her kids, and who were back at home. And that was like the first time when I think we started to utilizing conference calls within our company. That was back in the travel guard days. And I remember conferencing the mother with all of her kids, and she got to tell the story about what happened and everything else. And then at that moment, it was just like, wow, I'm like in the middle of this human, drama, and what quickly I realized within like a matter of 2 minutes, I needed to step in and start telling the entire group of people what the next steps are, and coming in from that not emotionless type of perspective, but more of here's what we're going to do next, and we're going to get in touch with the embassy. We're going to organize, because that's immediately questions like, what's next? What do we need to do? Do we need to jump on the plane? Mom, do we need to help you? And this is where we realize that we're doing something that is quite unique. And this is the approach that I guess any travel insurance company would take when they do medical assistance. Because, I mean, most of the time people don't call you that something great happened, right? while they're traveling. So it's usually something that they need help with. And and it's kind of, and now it's like naturally in my brain, every time I hear something, even with my friends when they travel, it's just like you become to be that person to solve the problem. So
Yeah. Oh, are you the guy that's on call when your friends are away and something's gone wrong?
yeah, yes, they do. And of course, I'm a big supporter of having travel insurance. And many of my friends, even my friends, don't think about travel insurance. And sometimes, for my mom, for example, she'll never buy it because she comes from a background where I only buy things that I can use, essentially. And so I would secretly buy a policy for her, because it's one of those things that it's quite important. And but yeah, that's kind of why we're so passionate about battleface and what we're doing, is because um, we know how important the policies are, we know how important the products are, but then when we started to look into the conflict zones to start with, or emerging markets, we quickly realized that the same exact problem doesn't apply only in the conflict zone areas, but also in standard destinations. At the time, we were trying to solve war and terrorism exclusion. So, for example, Tunisia, one of the popular destinations for British travelers, if there's a terrorist attack in the resort, the insurance companies have the right to deny your claim, because war and terrorism is one of the top exclusions that exists on travel insurance policies. Or immediately they stop selling policies for you to travel there. So, for example, if there was a terrorist attack in Tunisia and then you had your flight booked just 2 weeks after that, insurance companies have the right to essentially deny cover, because all of a sudden British government would come out and say it's not safe to travel to Tunisia. And people don't know that. And I think COVID-19 kind of like exposed that to the world overnight.
That's the thing with travel insurance, that it's hard enough buying household contents insurance in the UK that actually covers you adequately. When you look at something like travel, and as you touched on there, I remember when growing up, people went to Spain or they went to France. Now it's absolutely vanilla to have had the typical travel experience of someone going to Thailand or the Philippines or Japan, or I'm not saying that these places are risky, but what I'm saying is that you're going into a different jurisdiction, a different legal coverage. You don't know the risks, and you need that expertise of someone to say, look, if something terrible happens or something bad happens, this is what the next steps are. And there's a lot of people out there that are traveling either without it or assuming they're covered because they've bought this one size fits all coverage, and presumably for a lot of cases they're actually not.
Yeah, that's there's and that's kind of like the problem that many countries are discovering too. Like here in the United States, there was a huge regulators basically. It comes out from different angles. So one, insurance companies are still selling the same products that they've been selling 40 years ago. And of course, 40 years ago, the way our parents or grandparents traveled was completely different. They went to a travel agency, they went to a tour operator. It was more predefined. So it was easier for insurance companies back then to build one size fits all type of products because they were just based on high volumes and low pricing. And then eventually pricing kept going down and down. But and this is what, and I think this is where it's not fair on the consumers because, for example, distribution channels are becoming more and more expensive. If an insurance company wants to distribute through an airline.com type of space or a large aggregator site, those companies are asking for large commissions for sharing, for selling the products on their websites. Then insurance companies are paying out those commissions, but then at the end of the day, it's the consumers who are suffering because the benefits are they getting slimmer and slimmer and slimmer because, like if you're paying somebody 60 to 70% commission, like how are you going to pay claims at the end of the day?
Yeah.
So, and that's what, we weren't solving that problem when we started, but we discovered that problem really fast because every time, you speak to a distributor, all of a sudden they want these high commissions. You're like, well, how in the world would we be able to do that? So that's, but then that goes back to the products that are being sold. So then I think I remember during COVID-19, there was a big New York Times article right on the homepage where the question mark is travel insurance worthless ? And that's what COVID-19 discovered because all of a sudden, all of these restrictions came into play, including with the airlines that were selling products that they were selling for many, many years. And then consumers in the UK, for example, they came to discover that they couldn't cancel their flight because flights were still going to places like Spain and Italy. But the exact same policy that they've purchased from their airline was not covering them while they're traveling because the government said it was not safe to travel because of COVID-19. So all of a sudden, consumers were left with thousands of pounds of unrefundable expenses that they would lose, hotel and airlines and everything else. And they didn't want to travel without being protected. So
that's really interesting. So, I mean, we sort of strayed into the realms of what I was going to ask you, sort of a broader question of what the sort of the impact of the sort of pandemics had on the travel insurance industry. Has that been it? It's kind of shone a light on what's wrong with it, but presumably also there must be opportunities that have come out of that, particularly as something more bespoke that you're sort of talking about there.
Well, yeah, and that's when you start to think back a bit, at least, from our experience, when I started working in the travel insurance industry, September 11th was the biggest disaster as my first experience. All of a sudden, September 12th, no one's traveling. No one, I remember actually I was coming back from Brighton a few days before that, and I was working on a multitude of medical cases where we had to work on getting special permissions for air ambulances to transfer patients from one point to another. So that was one side of the chaos. Second side of the chaos, on September 12th or 13th, like sales stopped. No one was traveling. So it took the industry of about a month or 2 months to start recovering, and the recovery was pretty fast. But then the awareness of travel insurance was really high as well. And that's when insurance companies had to start looking into how they're going to start accommodating the fear of travel, right? Or and looking into different type of benefits. But then quickly after that, now thinking back, tsunami in Thailand, for example. I remember that in over Christmas, right? Several years ago, thousands of people were died or were stranded, or then Ebola, SARS, ash volcano, right? All of these kind of events, they have an impact on travel and travel insurance in general, and the way we travel. And now looking back, my question would be, why is it that travel insurance products don't adapt to that? Because there's so many changes that are taking place within the world. And I think it's it's an opportunity for new companies like battleface to rise up, because traditional carriers they've built their systems around legacy distribution channels, legacy kind of old ways of traveling, and even the way we created our rating module, it's very specific to your destination, to your age, and to the number of days of travel, and to your activities. And that's we feel that that's a proper way to rate policies, and it's fair on the consumers and underwriters, insurance companies, because you can't leave out the insurance companies as the bad guys, quote unquote, because at the end of the day, they're trying to do what's right. So if the products are priced correctly, and consumers are willing to pay for it, then there's no reason why insurance companies cannot be innovative or create these products and create these coverages. So that's why it was easy for us to work with Lloyd's of London, for example, and add COVID-19 for medical expense coverage, or open up different destinations for coverage. And so, for example, like, you see in the traditional channels, like, you're buying the 50-pound policy to go to Spain and a 50-pound policy to go to the United States, where it logically makes no sense, because medical care in the United States is much higher than it would be in Spain, right? So that's where I think there's an issue with the way products are created and rated. So,
So what's changed? What's changed for you guys at the end of this year that you hadn't foreseen at the start of the year? Because obviously, if we were innocently having this conversation 12 months ago, not knowing this is going to happen, has the company sort of changed course, or is it just in new products and things have come out, or is it something more fundamental?
No, I think what we learned when we were starting out, like creating the platform that's actually is adaptable to change and is adaptable to disasters, was a great kind of like, oh wow, like what we were building is actually makes sense. I think what changed is the consumer behavior and the knowledge of what they need. That's like a Hollywood movie ending, right? Where everyone is like knows exactly what they need to.
Yeah.
Before COVID-19, like my mom, for example, in the story of my mom, she would have no idea what she was buying. She would have no idea why she needs travel insurance, and she would. And she wouldn't even know what to look for. Nowadays, she would, because there's so much of awareness, there's so much of discussions, and there's like this international requirement for you to have proper travel insurance. And some countries are actually stepping up and saying you need these particular benefits, like in case of Costa Rica or Brazil. When you go into the travel requirements into these countries, they tell you your policy needs to have this particular limit, your policy needs to have COVID-19 cover, and so on, and it just keeps going on and on. And I think that's going to stay. And I think also consumers. I've never heard, before COVID-19, anyone mentioning pandemic cover or travel warnings, right? So because you don't think about that when you travel, and now it's like one of the first two questions that travelers are asking. So, and I think what really changed for us is of course, the growth. That was almost overnight. That's like, again, the success story of a startup. All of a sudden, it's a hockey stick up. And then, it was amazing to see all the Trustpilot reviews, so customers' feedback, how easy it is, how flexible it is, the customer service aspect of it. That was another thing that was very interesting for me to see, is that consumers, I thought specifically in England, people just don't trust travel insurance companies. Like when we're
I think we don't trust insurance companies, I'll be honest.
It's just like every phone call is just like this doubtful, right? Like, what's the catch? Can I do this? Can I do that? And for example, like the pre-existing medical condition, we've made a decision that we're not going to go through the medical screening process, and we'll just have the 12 months period. If you were treated for anything in the last 12 months, that specific condition would be excluded. But we didn't want to go through the process of interviewing you, asking for your medical history, excluding cover, so we just made it simple. And that whole process like kind of like shifted the behavior of travelers, because they didn't understand why they liked it, and some of course didn't, because they had medical problems that they wanted to insure, or for example, refunding your policy. Many travel insurance companies out there would not refund you the policy if you didn't call them within 14 days of the look back period. And then if they do, they have a 25 pound or 45 pound administration fee. And the administration fee, I still don't understand. It's just like, what exactly, like, why is it a fact? Maybe it's back in the day when, you had to write a check. Maybe that was a fee, but it literally one click of the button for you to refund somebody. There shouldn't be an administration fee. And especially in these days, when travel is so uncertain, in travel insurance companies, there shouldn't be any reason why consumers cannot be refunded the full premium if they're not using the policy, right? Yeah. Especially if they call you before they're supposed to travel. So things like that, that's very little things that were quite interesting. And of course, again, those are all coming up in the course of doing business, not why we started battleface. So
yeah, it's so interesting, the consumer thing, because I've been I'm in the process of moving house, and it's really interesting going through that process, and it's another sort of equally old industry, the idea of buying houses, the sort of legal process, and it's been really interesting looking at that in the perspective of talking to lots of people that are kind of entrepreneurial and doing new things. And there's admin fees on that, and they're charging me for postage, and I'm like, don't post anything to me. I don't want any post. I don't and that admin fee, I've come across with that actually on my travel insurance, because I had it renewed, and then I decided I wasn't going to travel much, and then wanted it back, and then the £25. And I think we're in an age now where it's so transparent about quality of service, and you get exposed on things like on review sites, and that's such a positive thing, because I think one of the criticisms of the industry as a whole is the lack of simplicity. So little things like saying we only want to know about the last 12 months if there's anything medically that we can exclude is so kind of welcome by the consumer, because I think a lot of the mistrust from the consumer is in the overtly complex nature of insurance. And I understand that, but we also kind of need to put ourselves in the consumer's shoes and say, does a consumer want a 20-page document to explain what isn't covered? And the answer is no, because they're never going to reach it and they're never going to understand it. And I think when someone as a consumer feels like a service is being hidden behind sort of legalese and complex questions, inherently you distrust them, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And then it's like a lot of people are asking me questions like, where does innovation come from? And the secret is the customers, right? So and as a team, we're all involved with customers. We talk to we take customer service phone calls, we respond to emails, and you have to be in tune. When I see like the big kind of like the traditional CEOs of the companies on interviews, you can tell they have no idea what they're talking about, because it's all generic answers, right? It's not very specific. So there a lot of CEOs and a lot of traditional companies are just so far removed from the customer, and then the very customer service kind of frontline employees are not giving any permission to be innovative, right? So they're and that's where I think that's like the very first step, for example, in the very simple terms, when you're making a call to your insurance company or any company, right? And the customer service agent is not even able to make a decision, then that's something that's wrong with the company, I think, as well, where you have to be, asking for a manager or supervisor or whoever to get something done. Everyone should be in tune with the customer, with the product, and continue to make changes. And even with our company, what was relevant yesterday might not be relevant today, and we continue to make that change. Like, for example, here in the United States, we have a trip cancellation benefit on our products, and we've noticed that consumers were buying full trip cancellation cover, which is the most expensive part of travel insurance policy, because it's based on the percentage of the total trip cost, sometimes between 6 to 10%. But then we've noticed that the travel dates before when you bought the policy and before you travel were like a day or the same day of travel, right? So consumers didn't even know what they were buying, because trip cancellation usually is months in advance. So you're buying that benefit to protect your investment in case you're not able to travel, but then you don't really need that benefit if you're traveling tomorrow. So we're changing our products now, where in the US we're going to offer that as an add-on and not as an upfront question. But I think it's going to be very difficult for a travel insurance company to shift their thinking, because obviously that's a very profitable line of business. So decisions have to be made on behalf of consumers, and a lot of companies rely on regulators to tell them what to do, which I think is the right approach. But also you need to combine it with the actual customers who are you working with.
Yeah, it's not good enough to go, this is the legal minimum thing that we need to do. We've spotted a loophole. But that's no, I think that's absolutely true. And I think innovation coming from the customer, and you have empathy for legacy businesses or big incumbent players, because the ability to sort of structure their communication flow so it's coming directly from the customer facing staff is difficult. It's making changes at scale are difficult, and that's where kind of newer startup focused businesses can have a massive impact on an industry, that they can implement change a lot quicker.
Yeah, and I think and this is where I think the legacy players or insurance carriers themselves, I think they have an advantage over startups, because they can easily, obviously they have a lot of money, they should have a lot of resources, they should be able to innovate. For some reason it's not happening, and we've seen this for decades over and over and over. That's why startups or innovation is always kind of like in the forefront. But right now we have a lot of partners that are coming our way and saying, can you do something for our customers? And in the traditional world, you will see the exact same products being distributed from insurance carriers' websites to their partner websites. And that's one thing that we are finding out, is that the partners that we're working with, their customers are completely different set of customers. And this is where the next thing for battleface is we're going to start custom building products for our partners. Because whoever comes to battleface.com, those are your younger travelers, surfers, divers, kind of adventure travelers. Yes, it works for general travelers as well. But then there are partners that, let's say like Airbnb of the world or airlines of the world, their customers are doing completely different things, and they are different purchase path, they're different thinking, they're different benefits that they would be looking for. So this is where what we would be doing, we would be custom building products for these partners, but then still apply the same processes behind the products: customer service, technology, delivery of policy documents, making it simple, and then the 24/7 assistance. And this is where I think yet another opportunity for new companies to come in is to start custom building products, and not reselling the exact same products that you're selling on your own website, because every brand and every customer of that brand has unique needs, essentially. So yeah.
Yeah, I even think that, because even when I'm personally traveling from my own experience, is that I've done more adventurous travel, and I've tended to sort of build that myself a bit more bespoke. And then I'm, if I'm going via booking.com and just going for a sort of hotel, and in itself, I know that I use different pathways to book different types of holidays. And so the cover I would need from both of those kind of routes is automatically different. So yeah, that's a really interesting point. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, because obviously you successfully raised some investment capital this year on quite some scale. So, well, congratulations, because there's a lot of people after that sort of capital at the moment, and it's not easy to get. But I wanted to sort of talk to you about how was that in the context of pandemic? Were you doing remote pitches, or was it quite far down the line already that sort of you were just sort of picking up on it?
No, I mean, yeah, it wasn't that difficult. I think we raised our seed round in 2019, early 2020.
Yeah.
And through that process, you meet a lot of people.
Yeah.
And when you meet people, they say, like, oh yeah, go ahead with your seed, but then once you get to the Series A stage, talk to me. Then of course referrals, and then naturally Drive Capital, who we started to work with, was referred to us through the network that we currently had. And they took a really interesting approach. They flew out to meet with us face to face, wearing masks, of course. But at least it was an interaction that we got to meet each other.
Please tell me you sold them some cover before they flew.
I was trying to, yes. But yeah, I think that was they took and the interesting part was, and I don't know if it's, again, our culture or the way we speak, but I think they were interested in the reason I think, I didn't ask them this, I should, but I was concentrating on the things that we are not good at when I was raising. So here's what we're good at. We're good at, insurance services, technology, customer service, product, which in their world, that's the most difficult part, right? Because they love the aspect of innovation and insurance, and they said it over and over that you figured out the most difficult part, but then the stuff that we were weak at, like unit economics and all the Harvard questions that you get, or engineering or data science and AI and everything else that now is the next phase of the company. This is what Drive Capital was phenomenal at. And they've had experience with previous companies that they've invested in. And so there was kind of like a good marriage. And I think, and that was the approach that was quite successful, is, when you go into raising, you gotta talk about what you want to do and what you need help with, because what I've learned is that venture capital companies or any investors, they want to help to grow the business, right? So, and then what are the areas that they can concentrate in? So I think at the end, I think it was not difficult because we were growing so fast, and then we've established relationships already from our seed raise. What I think was difficult for me, well, not difficult actually, for me, it was a very easy decision immediately to work with Drive Capital because of their approach and personalities. It makes a huge difference as well. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've talked to quite a few people on the podcast that have raised capital, and the thing that keeps coming up is sort of smart money, as in the right fit, and the way you sort of are weak, they're strong, and there's a relationship. But secondly, on it's a business marriage, right? And you've got to get on well with your partner. There's got to be a relationship there.
Yeah, exactly.
I always use that term in marriage. I always use it when I'm talking about hiring people, because my thing is sort of always when sort of people are interviewing, it's like you're just dating, no one's getting married yet. And then but when you are committing to sort of work with anyone, whether it be an investment partner or going work for them as an employer, you are committing lots of your time. You'll probably see that person more than your family. And I think it's particularly an apt thing to say about kind of venture capital money or investment money, because it's usually a really expensive divorce process as well. So
Yeah, it is. And then it's like my favorite aunt. She was married multiple times. She always said that marriage has to be easy, right?
yeah,
And so she kept moving on to her next marriage, and then yeah, it kind of stuck in my brain because she's been saying that to me ever since I was like a kid. The relationships have to be easy, and you're right. And I think it has to be from for personal, professional, and even with investors too. Like I've spoken
Mhm.
to so many investors who were just immediately going into the conversation doubting you, right? So it's like a casting call, right? Like when you want to be an actor and you just keep getting shut down. And that was just like I couldn't understand why that was the case. Like obviously we're successful, obviously we're doing something that we know. It's not like we're just fresh off the street and all of a sudden we want to do something in travel insurance. And like Paul, for example, who's overseeing our UK operation, he was a Lloyd's of London underwriter of travel insurance and accident and health for the last 40 years. So obviously Paul has street cred in terms
Mhm.
of creating products and seeing, and many times, Paul and we don't agree on underwriting or benefits, but he's always kind of like he always prevailed in terms of the decision making because you just can't argue with the level of experience.
Mm.
And so yeah, I think many VC companies that I was talking to, they were just doubtful, and I know that's their job, but I think there's ways of how to approach it, and the successful ones, the ones that we were working with, approached it from a very diplomatic, very kind of relationship building perspective. Like, this is all fantastic. Where can we help? And where do you need help? In what areas? So, for example, in our seed raise, our lead investor is a reinsurance company out of Cayman Islands, Greenlight Reinsurance, and that's a fantastic kind of strategic partner, because eventually, we would want to add additional capacity behind our products, and they're extremely helpful in terms of giving us support from actuarial perspective or product development perspective or just feedback. And so you need to have kind of all different backgrounds in your, circles, or whatever you call
Yeah, yeah, of course. So what's the objective with the capital? I know we talked briefly. You mentioned just there kind of sort of some of the things you'd want to look at is engineering, data sciences. Is it to hire and grow the team, and is that the main sort of drive of the capital?
Yeah, that's primarily like, I was talking to our team yesterday, and there's the job descriptions that we're putting together. I'm like, I've never even heard of these titles before. So yeah, it's awesome just to go through this experience. And
Mm,
yeah, it's basically looking at the company from all different directions and where we can have the biggest impact. Again, at the end, making travel insurance relevant, and how can we use data to to continue to make a difference within the product pricing, benefits, and services. Services is a big thing as well. So
mm.
yeah, we're expanding on our engineering team. I mean, I do have one challenge. I have to do it from Columbus, Ohio. That's where we're moving our headquarters.
You have to do it there.
Yeah, but we're building a global company, so it definitely is. We'll continue to hire talented people from around the world.
Mm.
And so, for example, one big thing we're doing is making sure that we continue to offer 24/7 services without building one big call center and
Yeah.
utilize different time zones. Like yesterday, I was talking to a customer who was from Newcastle, and he's like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm based in Virginia." He's like, "Oh wow, that's incredible." And then once you start telling the story, like, "Oh yeah, we're building a global company, and that's why we're 24/7." People just are like, they're surprised by that, and they love it because sometimes customer calls us at 2 o'clock in the morning UK time, and we answer here in the US, and like, "Oh,
Mm.
I just called to see what time you're open, what your business hours are," and and you can do that with today's technology. You don't need to build a 24/7 call center with 3 shifts, right?
Yeah.
Everyone can continue to be in the time zone where they are. And from travel perspective, on the medical assistance side, the phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning, phone call is going to come from that time zone anyway. No one's going to call. That's how we operate, and you provide the most effective services when you do that. So yeah, it would be difficult for us to build that out of Columbus. So global aspect of the company will continue to develop, but in Columbus we're hiring engineers, marketing, like product people. So for example, one of the things when I was talking to Drive, they were saying, "Oh, you need someone who's going to oversee product." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, underwriters, of course." And they're like, "No, no, no, that has nothing to do with underwriting from marketing perspective."
Yeah.
So yeah, there's already a shift in thinking, at least from my perspective, on how we can approach the business from more analytical side of things, technology, data science, AI, how we can improve, because most of our business is so direct to consumer focused, and how can we automate not the customer service aspect of it, because we still believe in the human correspondence, but the actual technicalities, like I want to change my policy, I want to edit my travel dates, I want to want to renew my policy, and things like that. So
yeah, and I think that's exactly right. I think there's a balance, isn't there, between, I think people want to feel when they're buying something like travel insurance, or certainly utilizing it, you want it to be as frictionless as possible, but you want that human touch, because that's, that human touch in travel, particularly in the face of, as you said, unfortunately, you're never really talking to people when it's a good situation. That's when you want a human on the phone, and someone that knows what they're talking about to help you. But most of the time, the kind of admin of insurance, you want it as frictionless and as quick and easy as you can.
yeah.
I wanted to just sort of briefly, I'm conscious of our time, and I'll bring this to a close. But obviously, you're building this global company, been remotely onboarding people as you go. How are you going to approach, or what's your thoughts really on maintaining a company culture when you're trying to do sort of a global business that's in different time zones? How do you maintain that kind of company culture?
Yeah, that's probably the most challenging part as well. And with your background, you probably know this more than I do, but I think it's, I guess, again, it's like all kind of, like, for example, we just had our first remote Christmas party, and it went on for like hours. We even had like in the traditional world, where you have like a group of people that just stay at the bar for hours after everyone's gone. We even had that, like 6 people just after everyone left, just continued to have drinks and talk and laugh. And so I think that was like, it was impromptu. I even called it non-obligatory Christmas party, and people were joining in and out. So, and I think it was just, and I remember starting to give like an inspirational speech to everyone, and they're like, "Just shut up, and we just drink and have a good time." So it's like, you just got to be normal, right? So you can just be stiff and try hard enough. But yeah, I think constant communication, I think, is a key. Making a phone call to each other and speaking, and we're dreaming, and we have this dream internally that we're gonna get together in 2021 somewhere, somehow, for a gathering. So everyone's having that dream. But yeah, I think now, again, COVID-19 is helping, right? Because all of a sudden everyone's remote, everyone's getting used to it. But I think it's going to be, I don't have an answer. I think it's just try to be human, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it's one of those unique challenges that's getting thrown up. That some culturally businesses have done it. Tech because I've done quite a lot of tech and data science stuff in the past for insurance, and a lot of the challenges have been that was already an industry that adopted remote working. So you'd have people that were very resistant to coming into the office. And then there was always the pushback from the client saying, we need people in the office because we want to be part of the culture. And now we've got to adapt to a world where most roles at the moment, at least, are remote only. And then there's so many schools of thought on how do we sort of maintain a culture. But I think be human is such a simple, but actually the right phrase is that, you know, we know that people need a phone call and they need a Zoom call, and people need to be included, and essentially communication needs to be as good as it can be, whilst accepting that sadly there's some elements of it you're just going to miss. But I think hiring the right people, it speaks very highly of your business that you've got people that still wanted to stay on that call and, you know, stay on that Zoom and have the Christmas drinks. And I think that's, you know, that is a unique challenge as you get bigger as well. You know, you sort of lose some of that culture. But yeah, it's a challenge I think we're all going to be facing, particularly next year. So look, Sasha, thank you so much. I won't take up any more of your time. I was very conscious that we said 45 and we've gone on a little bit longer than that. But it sounds like it's going to be really exciting for 2021. But if there's any product people out there, data engineers, data scientists, where can they keep tabs on where they might apply for jobs for you?
Battleface.com. Yeah,
battleface.com.
Quite easy to find it. So
yeah. But Sasha, thank you once again for your time. I really, really appreciate it. And look, I look forward to seeing what you guys do next year.
Amazing. Thank you.